how to pump an expansion vessel up on a combi boiler and what tools that you might want or you might need. Things like Schrader valve tools to take your Schrader valve out if your Schrader valve were leaking. Also got quick release connection for your pump. Also what type of pump that you can use. So you can use battery operated pumps. You can also use foot pump, which I've got there. So I'll show you both different scenarios with that. Also got an extended lead. So obviously if you're going to use a foot pump or a electric pump, you might want a longer lead so that you're not struggling with a little short lead. Also on some boilers you might need a bent connection as well. So again, we'll look at that. And also I've got a digital, I've not used this before, just been given this. So we'll have a look at that as well. That's just for testing Schrader valve and testing foot pressure. So yeah, let's go on with this video. You could actually skip with this, it's so long. First of all, what we'll do, just have a quick chat about an expansion vessel and why we're going to pump it up. So in your expansion vessel, this side of the expansion vessel, the side what the Schrader valve is on, this side, this has air in here, and in the middle of it has a rubber diaphragm in there, and then the other side of that expansion vessel is the central heating water. And what happens is, as the heating gets warm, the hot water in the vessel expands, or the hot water in the heating system expands, and it needs somewhere for it to expand to. So what you notice on a boiler, on the pressure gauge on the front of the boiler, what you sometimes notice is that when the heating is on, the pressure goes right up, and sometimes that'll go up and it'll go past 3 bar and it might start dripping outside. Now this is a common problem when customers say my boiler's losing pressure and when I get up I've got to keep topping it up all the time, and this could be down to lack of servicing. So a lot of the time when people come and do a service, they do not top the expansion vessel up, which you don't always have to do it, but most of the time you do. And especially if you go to one for the first time, there's a good chance it's never been pumped up. So in that case, you know, you would pump it up to whatever the manufacturers would say. Normally, I mean, I've been pumping them up for years, and I would normally pump them up to about 1 bar or just under. Depends on the size of the expansion vessel, but you'd need to check with that. But as I say, that's the reason that we're doing it. The reason we're pumping it up is, one, is to make sure the boiler's working as it should work, but also to stop customers having problems. So sometimes I see customers on forums and stuff and they'll say, well, I've never had my boiler service, but I've had my expansion vessel changed, that's all I've had done. Well, that's because you've not had your boiler serviced, so you're getting repairs done because you're not maintaining it. It's a bit like having a car and, you know, never servicing it, never pumping your tyres up or whatever. Eventually tyres might go flat. And same with an expansion vessel, that's going to get a lot of use because it's moving back and forth all the time. So what I'll do now, go through some of the tools that you can use to pump it up and test it, and then I'll show you how to test it, and I'll show you some things not to do as well. There's some really important things not to do when you're going to do it, but yeah, we'll go through that shortly. So the first thing we'll look at is a manual foot pump. Now, I have had bike ones in the past, what I've used, and they've been okay, but they don't tend to, they're a little bit awkward. You've got to try and get it up and pump. This is a special one for gas engineers. So this is from Arctic A's. This is their pump, and it's just a normal pump, but the good thing with this is it's got a really long tube on it. So you can connect that onto your expansion vessel. You can connect it on, and then that can be wherever you want then. I mean, that's reaching to the floor there, and there's still loads on it. So if your boiler were highish up, you could still use it and you could pump it up. It's also got a digital gauge on this, which is really handy. So you better pump it up with that. I'd always advise you have a manual pump in your van regardless, like this. And then you can also use a pump where you've got a battery, like that. Problems with this is sometimes your battery might go flat. Obviously you have to make sure you charged it. Also on this one, the tube on it is really short, so if you're going to use something like that, you might want to get one of these extended hoses, and then you can just put your extended hose onto it like that, and then that'd just make it a little bit easier and a little bit easier to use. Also with these, it's got a quick release on it, so you're not like sometimes when you do boxes and stuff, it's hard to unscrew it and get it off right quick. With these, you can just go and it's done, and you're not losing any pressure out of it. So they're just two of the types of pumps you could use. If you could put a comment below and let me know what type of pump you're using at the minute, that'd be really helpful. Another thing that I've got, and I'll see if I can find some links to all different ones of these, but you can also get a bent. I've actually got this, I got this on a Baxi training course probably about 10 years ago. Yeah, so bent one, that fits inside Baxis really easy on older Baxis. A lot of newer boilers now, they'll have a shredder valve on front, or they'll have them up top. So that Alpha's got on top, Baxi's got on top, so it just makes it easier for you to get to. On Ideal, it's got it on front, on Logic, it's on front on Vogue, so that they're easy to work on. And then we've got a digital pressure gauge. Again, as I say, this is the first time I've seen this today, but if you didn't want to pump it up, you could just check it maybe with digital pressure gauge before you start, and you could see what pressure is before you do out with it. One thing that's really good, and the pennies, I mean, they're really cheap. I think these are about £1.50 or £2. Really cheap. Might be a little bit more expensive if you get it with Schrader valves. So you can get spare valves, spare Schrader valves. So if one of these were passing, so I've had a few on Vogues that have been passing. That's only because I've installed quite a few Vogues, so I probably serviced more Vogues than other boilers, Vogues and Logics. But that just unscrews out then, and you could clean that off and put it back in if you wanted to. But notice on that then, no air come out of there. I've not taken the pressure out on that, which is so really it should have had some pressure in. So whoever serviced this in the past might not have pumped expansion vessel up. So that's just about it with what tools. What I'll do now, we'll have a look at one of the absolutely do not do's is do not take the pressure out of the boiler of the blow off with a PRV. What can happen is, if you do that, central heating water normally has some muck, some bits of grit in it, and if you open the PRV, the pressure relief valve, you can get a bit of grit in there and it might not seal very well. So if you do start messing with that, you're probably going to have to take it all out, clean it all off, and then put it back together, or even put a new one in. So personally, I wouldn't normally use the pressure relief valve to drain the boiler. But what we're going to do now, we're going to go through pumping the expansion vessel up, what we do, sort of step by step. One of the things, when you're pumping the expansion vessel up, you need to make sure there's no pressure on the other side of the expansion vessel. So on the water side, you don't want no pressure on it. So what you need to do, we need to drain the boiler down. Now, there's a few ways that you can do this. On most boilers, there'll be a drain on the boiler. So on the Baxes, there's a drain on it. Worcester's, the Worcester drain is amazing. Probably one of the best boilers for draining down, because the outlet on it is massive. You can put a big full hose on it, which is really good. But what we need to do, we need to get the water out, but also depending on the boiler. So for instance, with a Worcester again, the valves underneath on the Worcester are normally quite good. So if you isolate the boiler, you isolate the flow and return on the boiler, and then you drain the boiler down. And then as you're pumping the expansion vessel up, which we'll do shortly, but as you're pumping the expansion vessel up, you'll notice some water will start coming out. So for instance, if it were a Worcester here, you had a drain here, and it was going into a bucket, you started pumping this expansion vessel up, then you'll notice some more water will come out, and that'll be just some water that's in here, and it'll come out and it'll come into your bucket. And then you need to sort of leave it then for a few minutes, well, a minute or 30 seconds or whatever, just to let it settle, and then pump it back up again to the pressure that you're wanting it to be, depending on the manufacturers, depending on the boiler. Like I say, as a rule, personally myself, and I know some people say, oh no, you don't do it like that, but I just do it about 1 bar across all the boilers, because then I know that, and I've never personally had an issue with that. I've never gone back a year after and there's been an issue because I've done it to 1 bar. Some people will say, oh no, you do it to 0.9. I think it's 0.6 plus the head, and then you have to start working it out. But the way I see it is, if you keep it simple, stupid, isn't it? So that's what they say, don't they? So if you keep it simple, then you know when you go to an house, you're just doing them all similar. But as I say, always check with manufacturers on that, check what the manufacturer require, and if you've got any comments on that, please put comments below. But yeah, let's get into this now, and I'll show you how to pump it up. So the first boiler that I'm going to show you is a Baxi Platinum, so same as your Baxi Duotex and some Pottertons and main boilers as well. So I've turned the mains off to the boiler. Obviously we've done all our electrical checks that we would, TB118. So what I would do then is I would close the flow and return valves. You've got to be a little bit careful with these. If they're quite old, you might just want to take the pressure out of the system and not touch the valves. So just something for you to be wary of. If it's a newish boiler, then it should be okay, and it'll be under warranty if they did leak. So this is on, and then that's to turn it off. And then also on this one, because we've got a filter on, I'm going to isolate the filter, the valve on the filter. So I've only turned off the flow and the return on the filter, and then I can use the filter then to drain the system down. So you can see here on this, I'm going to take a sample at the same time because I'm going to do a water test with AD Pro Check. As always, you should only go into the combustion case if you're gas safe registered and competent to do so. This red bit here, that's the expansion vessel. And to get to the expansion vessel, I take out the spark generator and just turn the gutter round out of the way. And it just makes it easier to get into. You can bend the gutter down, I've seen somebody do, but I don't do that. I just take spark generator out, and then you can just easily get into this then. And you can just get to its radar valve onto the top of expansion vessel, and it's a lot easier. And then what we've got the bent connector, which I've already shown you earlier. And then we just screw that onto the expansion vessel, and then we would pump the expansion vessel up to whatever we require. And as I say, we'd leave it a little bit and make sure that it is at the pressure you want it to be, and then we just spray the shredder valve afterwards, because often, or the biggest cause I would say, is leaking shredder valves. So you can just replace that shredder valve sometimes. You will see on Baxes that often they leave that bent connector on, and that's because they don't want to put a new expansion vessel in. And once you've pumped your expansion vessel up, all you're going to do then is turn the valves back on, and then obviously you're going to refill the system, get any air out that you can. I will add a link below to some of these products. if you use a particular product, a particular pump, or any type of connectors like these, then please put a comment below and let me know what you use. That'd be really useful. What we'll do now, we did a video recently with Viva Training Academy, with Roy from Viva Training Academy, and Roy takes the expansion vessel out, actually one of these boilers, and he puts it on and tests it and shows you how to test pressure switches, and it's really useful. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to add it on to the end of this video, so hopefully this video then will give you a full broad view and knowledge of expansion vessels. Yeah, so yeah, let's go over to Viva Training Academy. Gas training, how an expansion vessel works. My name's Alan Hart, and today I'm at Viva Training Academy, and we've got Roy is a trainer here, and he's been a trainer for many years. I've been on many of Roy's training courses myself, and he's an amazing trainer. And Roy's going to go through how an expansion vessel works. So that most of us know by now from the videos we've done previously is an expansion vessel is used in a boiler because when water gets hot, water expands at 4%, and we need something on the system to take up that expansion. So that's what an expansion vessel does in the system. And Roy's going to go through testing, like there's got a pressure sensor on here, there's different types of sensors, and he's also going to explain to us about expansion vessels. So without further ado, let's go over to Roy.
Thanks, Alan. Hi guys, it's Roy Fugler here at Viva Training Academy over in Halifax again, and today we're going to have a look at expansion vessels and expansion vesseling in a boiler. So this is a little rig, so just to explain a bit about this rig. So an expansion vessel is in two halves, so you've got a section there, that's got air, that comes out the factory, and that's got an air charge in there, and we can top that air charge up. And on a service visit, we should really be checking that air charge. Some manufacturers say we should check it every service. Some say as and when necessary, but I'll come back onto that. The other side of it, the back side of it, that's got water in it. As you can see on my rig, it's connected into the pipework there, and I've got one or two little things. So this is just a simulation. So on here, I've also got a low pressure cut-off switch. That's there, so if the boiler loses pressure, it doesn't fire up dry, so it doesn't burn, it doesn't boil itself, it doesn't damage itself. And up here, I've got a pressure sensor. Some manufacturers are using low pressure cut-off switches, some manufacturers are using pressure sensors. So inside there's a diaphragm running down the middle, and that's separating the air pressure from the water pressure. So these come out the factory in the boilers, typically set at a particular pressure, somewhere between 0.8 and 1 bar. Now, an expansion vessel will have a data plate on there. That data plate will give you lots of useful information. It will give you that pressure that it comes out the factory set to. So I'll just put my glasses on so I can see what I'm reading. So this particular one on here, it explains its charge pressure is 0.8 of a bar, so just below 1 bar. Its litrage is 10 litres, so that's a 10 litre expansion vessel. Its maximum pressure is 3 bar, so that fits in with things like your pressure relief valve. That's a maximum of 3 bar. So if the pressure does get too much, that'll start to drip, so relieving pressure. And then its test pressure, it's tested up to 4.3 bar. Its temperature range is plus 90, minus 10, so we don't really want them at minus 10 because it's frozen. So I've got a gauge on here and it's set to 0.8, round about 0.8 of a bar, so that's as if this one's come out of the factory. Now, we don't want any water in here, so what I'm going to do is simulate the water pressure by using air. So I've got my raging pump here. So this is just as if we've hung this boiler on the wall, it's brand new, that expansion vessel's come out of the factory and it's got air pressure in there. So we're going to put some water pressure in. Now typically when I was installing boilers back in the day, I used to charge my boilers up with water up to about 1.2 bar. So I'm going to put around about 1.2 bar into the water side of it. So I'm just going to pump this up. Now what you'll notice is I'm putting the charge in there, the air, which is simulating the water, the pressure on the air side is actually going up because that water pressure is pushing against that diaphragm, which is starting to equalise the pressures. So as I get my 1.2 bar in there, and I'm just about there now, what we'll notice is that my air side of the expansion vessel is at 1.2 and my water side's at 1.2, so they've equalised. We'll also notice that my low pressure cut-off switch, which is basically a switch, all it's there to do, if there's no pressure in it or less than half a bar, it goes open circuit. So we can test that on a beep test. So I'm just going to get my multimeter on my beep test and pop it across the two connections there. So what we'll notice, we've got a beep, so we know that that's operating. Now this other pressure sensor, that's got 3 connections because it not only measures low pressure, it measures high pressure. So if I go across a couple of connections on there, I've got a reading on that one and I move it round to the ohms scale. 5.13 kiloohms. So I can tell I've got some pressure in there. So what I'm just going to do now, I'm going to drop the pressure out of it. So what you'll see is this one will come down and that one. So it's as if I'm draining the boiler down. I'm taking all the water pressure out of it. So the air pressure's coming down as well because we're taking that pressure away. So we've got down there below that half a bar. So if I just check these two sensors again. So I'm still getting roughly 1.5 on that side. If I check the other side, I'm getting 5.8. On the beep test, nothing, because it's gone below the pressure. So what we're going to do now is simulate you guys coming along on a service visit and there's no pressure in this side. So I'm just going to drain the pressure out of it. So all I'm doing is just letting the air out through the schrader valve. So I've took the pressure off there. And as we can see, it's going down. Now one of the problems that we can get with expansion vessels, they can get dirt in them. A lot of older systems, before we started flushing, before we started putting filters in there, they used to get blockages. So one of the problems that we can get is a blockage. Now I'm going to simulate a blockage just by turning this little blue tap off, so my expansion vessel is not going to be part of my circuit. So I'm just going to turn that off. So I've come along, my expansion vessel, I've got no pressure in, my boiler's lost all its pressure as well. So I'm going to pump my expansion vessel up. So I'm getting my pump again onto this back valve and I'm going to pump this up. Now, generally when I used to pump expansion vessels up, I'd usually put them to about a bar, because when you're taking that pump off, it'll always lose a little bit of air pressure. So I'm just going to pump that up to a bar. So this is my exercise for today. Keep my muscles built up. There we go, let's have a see what we've got. Just below. So I'm pumping him in. So I've got my air charge there, just about a bar. Pop him off and he stayed at a bar. My water side hasn't done anything. So I'm now going to pump that water side up. As you can see very, very quickly, that pressure's leapt right up there. It's leapt right up. So I've got about 1.5 bar in there now. Now what would happen is that that's cold. So when we put the boiler on, the temperature rises and that expands. So what's going to happen there, it's going to very quickly, as it heats up, go over 2 bar. And that's because it's not communicating with the air charge. The air charge is just sat there and it's still on 1 bar. So the boiler starts to drip. and it leaks out, and then it drops the pressure down, so the customer comes along, turns the filling loop on, and it's a vicious circle of repressurising, losing pressure, repressurising, losing pressure. So we're going to come along as an engineer, we've got a customer complaining, it's dripping out the PRV. So the first thing we notice is that the pressure's right up. We've got water dripping out there, so we're going to drain that down. So we drain that down. Before we do anything else, always take out the air pressure. Because we may come along now and we check it with a pump and we're still going to get just over a bar on the air side. So we might think, oh, the expansion vessel's fine, it's got a charge in there. But we're not communicating that charge. What we need to do is to take it and clean it out. But if we don't take that charge out there, what may happen is that you've got a 1 bar of pressure behind the diaphragm. Inside the other side of it, you've got dirty water. You won't do any connections, and the next thing that's going to happen is you're going to get a jet of dirty water either down you or all over your customer and the kitchen or the cylinder cupboard, wherever the boiler is. So we'd always, before we start removing expansion vessels, just make sure we take any charge out of the air side. That way, when we do undo any joints, any connections, if it's after the blockage, we're not going to flood the house, we're not going to get dirty water splashing all over. So once we get the pressure down to 0, then we can start undoing connections, we can start trying to find out where the blockage is. Now a lot of these expansion vessels are fitted on thin flexible hoses with tight bends on them. That's usually a favourite place to find them. That's where dirt can sit, can cause issues, and that's where it can block up. So it's always worth checking the expansion vessel, particularly if you're getting complaints and comments about dripping out the PRV. The other thing, it might be worth, depending on the cost of a new PRV, replacing that, because if it's been dripping for a while, there's a good chance there could be a bit of dirt on that seating. So that's just a quick one on expansion vessels, what to look for, what to check, how to test them. Hopefully you're not going to flood anybody's house or get dirty water down yourself. If you've got any questions, any comments, please put them down below. If there's any future videos you'd like us to do, any other information you'd like, please let us know. So that's been me, Roy Fugler at the Viva Training Academy over in Halifax, saying thanks very much for watching. Until next time, bye-bye.
Thank you very much for that, Roy, and once again thank you to Viva Training Academy, who's putting a lot of time and effort into hopefully helping new recruits, even people that's been doing the job a long time. To be honest, I always learn, always pick up some tips when I'm doing these type of videos, so you know, it's all good. So yeah, thank you to Roy, thank you to Viva Training Academy, and if you've got any questions, please put them in the comments below. And one thing I will say is always refer to the manufacturer's instructions, because things change and manufacturers sometimes change things. They sometimes have technical bulletins where they might tell you something different to what it previously said. So always check and always refer to the installation instructions. Thanks for watching.